Hey everyone, Tactics here, and with the return of Necrotic this week, I've been getting a lot of questions on how I personally deal with the affix as a tank, and so in this video, I'm going to be talking about just that. Whether it's abilities in your own toolkit as the tank, maybe something available to DPS or healer players you should be aware of, or just general things that you should know, like what stack number should I start kiting. This video will hopefully give you some good tips on how to handle the affix. To start off, what exactly is Necrotic? For those that don't know, it's a stacking physical damage dot that reduces your healing received by 2% per stack, lasting 9 seconds. This is applied to you when you get hit by an auto attack, with a few exceptions. Both bosses and lieutenant mobs apply Necrotic on every other attack as opposed to every attack, and if you're unaware, lieutenant mobs are basically just 61 elite mobs, the same ones that are CC immune in dungeons. So think things like the Shard of Halkias in Halls of Atonement, the big tree guys in Mist of Tyrna Scythe, any of the mini bosses in Theater of Pain. Those kinds of mobs will give you Necrotic on every other attack, which was added back in 9.1 at the beginning of the patch to make the affix a little bit easier to deal with when these unCCable mobs are in the pack. On top of this, during Shadowlands Season 2, we also have the Tormented affix, and none of the associated mini bosses will apply Necrotic at all. So unless you're pulling them with a trash pack, you won't have to worry about it stacking up on you. Now let's talk about how to handle the affix itself. Usually at some point in a pull, you're going to have to get yourself away from the pack and start kiting until your stacks drop. When you actually do this is going to depend on several different factors. So class is super important. Something like a Guardian Druid like I play with Ursoc's Fury Remembered legendary will completely be able to ignore Necrotic in things like their incarnation window, right? So they're able to stay in a lot longer than something like, say, a Blood Death Knight, where most of their mitigation comes in the form of self-healing. Another major factor is what CDs you have available. Big DRs like Guardian of Ancient Kings, Shield Wall, they can buy you a bit of time when you're at higher Necrotic stacks, and certain things like Paladin Bubble or Kyrian File can clear your stacks entirely. On the note of Kyrian File, there's even if you aren't Kyrian, the Clea Soulbind is able to actually apply File to the lowest health party member, so the whoever in your party is Kyrian can use that to actually clear the tank's Necrotic stacks. And our group actually does do this on Necrotic weeks. We have a priest healer who's Kyrian, and every Necrotic week he goes Clea, and we do plan out certain cleanses with his Clea File on me as the tank. It takes a little bit of finesse, right? Because you have to make sure that the priest has to have some HP missing so he can use File, and the tank has to be the lowest health person in the party. So it takes a little finesse. Final major factor of when you'll need to kite is the pull itself. How big is the pull? Obviously, for larger pulls, you're going to gain stacks faster, meaning you're going to need to kite earlier. Are there any lieutenant mobs in the pull that may be harder to get away from, meaning that you should kite a little bit earlier to give yourself some room for error? When you do actually get to that higher number of stacks, what's the pack health at? Like, is it near death? Can you maybe stay in until the pack dies and you'll be okay? Or is it nowhere near death? You need to get away ASAP. Are there any mobs with lethal tank busters in the pack, right? These are all things as a tank you personally need to consider for making the decision to kite. In terms of the actual stack number, again, this is going to vary. As a Guardian Druid, outside of Incarn, I start to kite anywhere from 20 to 30 stacks, right? If there's more lethal mobs in the pack, I'll go earlier. If it's a pretty flat damage pack, I'll go later in that range. So that's anywhere from like a 40 to a 60% healing reduction. But as I mentioned, again, all these factors I just discussed need to be taken into account. This is just kind of a rough estimate. In terms of how to actually get out, several different things can help you. Big movement abilities and knockbacks are definitely the most commonly used things, but there are things like hard CC, right? Stuns, heavy slows, they can also be enough for you to just make a little bit of space and start getting away from the pack. As a tank, usually you have a few of these in your own kit to use, and on Necrotic weeks, especially if you're pugging, I would 100% recommend saving your own kit tools to get out with Necrotic instead of dealing with other affixes. I'm sure a lot of you know pugs can be very hit and miss, and the lack of voice communication can make it very difficult to kind of coordinate the use of these abilities when you need them. So if you're completely relying on someone else to live, that's something you never want, right? You want full agency. as the tank, you want to completely rely on yourself, and so I would definitely recommend saving the abilities that you can use to get out for Necrotic for dealing specifically with Necrotic and not something like Sanguine like we have right now, right? Let's talk through the tanks. So what each tank has, know some tools each spec has, and let's start with Guardian Druid, which I main. Balance Affinity gives you Typhoon. 100% I prefer Typhoon over Ursul's Vortex. For Necrotic in general, I think Typhoon just gives you better general use. It gives you that instant space because it pushes the mobs from you, whereas Ursul's is that slow and then it'll pull things back in, but that instant space is very, very valuable. If you're Night Fae, you of course have Soul Shape. Soul Shape is a good blink, gets you out instantly. When it comes to defensives, as I mentioned earlier, Incarnation basically makes you immune to Necrotic for the 30 seconds, as the shield provided by the UFR legendary ignores the healing reduction entirely, so you can go up to as many stacks as you want. I have hit 99, but you do have to be aware that when Incarnation is done, you need to get the hell out because you're going to be completely unhealable. Outside of that though, in a pinch, Guardians do have Stampeding Roar for some speed, but realistically, between the combinations of Typhoon, which is a 30-second CD, and Soul Shape is like a minute and a half, you should have at least one available to use at all times. Brewmasters actually have a ton of really good tools as well. Ring of Peace is the big one. You can just plop that down right in front of you, and any non-lieutenant mob just won't be able to reach you through it. Transcendence, great as well. You can put that down before heading into the pack and then use it to get back out. They also have an AoE stun in Leg Sweep that can just give you enough time to get out, and even just rolling backwards is enough to make some space to start escaping. Vengeance Demon Hunters also have a pretty easy time escaping with a couple charges of Infernal Strike at their disposal, and even a talent like Sigil of Chains can be used to pull mobs just out of your range to give you some space to move. Of course, a lot of Vengeance players are also Kyrian, so in a pinch you can use File to cleanse your stacks completely. Moving on, we have Prot Paladins, who have some great tools as well. Of course, if you're Kyrian, File, and they also have Bubble, which is another complete stack cleanse. In terms of getting out, they really only have Divine Steed on the 1 minute CD, so depending on pull length and how frequently you need to kite, they may need some outside help in order to either create space or get them out. Blinding Light can be hit and miss depending on the Paxton's disorient, and so it will break on any non-holy damage, but sometimes it's enough to just give you that one step that you need, especially with something like Consecrated Ground, which makes it a lot easier to kind of circle kite within your consecration. Death Knights similarly don't have a ton of tools to get them out, but unlike Paladins, they have a little bit more frequent access, right? Death's Advance gives a little bit of speed, and then Grip of the Dead is a talent which puts a massive slow on mobs and lets you get away. And in a similar way that Sigil of Chains could be used by Vengeance Demon Hunters, or Fiend's Grasp can also be used to kind of pull the mobs away from you and just make some space, though it is on a longer 2 minute CD. Last up, we do have Warriors, who have a couple Covenant abilities that can help with kiting, actually. Their Kyrian Spear tethers things in place, preventing them from following you, and the Night Fae Ancient Aftershock will repeatedly CC mobs in the area, again allowing you to escape. And being either Kyrian or Night Fae also gives you access to one of File or Soul Shape, which is just another tool for dealing with Necrotic. Aside from the Covenants, Warriors also have Heroic Leap to just get out quickly, as well as an AoE stun in Shockwave, which can give them some time to escape with an ability like Intervene. Overall, pretty much every tank has something available to them, which allows them to deal with Necrotic, and again, my number one recommendation for Necrotic weeks, regardless of the second affix or what your spec is if you're tanking in a pug group, 100% save these abilities to deal with Necrotic, because again, relying on pug players to save your life is never something you want to do. A week like this week, Sanguine and Necrotic. As a Guardian Druid, I could save Typhoon to deal with a mob in Sanguine, and in my push group, I 100% would do this, where in voice comms, I can always call for a different knockback if I need to escape. However, if I'm pugging, you can't really communicate that need, right? You're relying on another player keeping track of your Necrotic stacks, which personally I think is much less likely than hoping that they see a mob in Sanguine and do something about it. So in a pug environment, assuming my group has other knockbacks available to them that they could use on Sanguine, as a Guardian Druid, I would definitely be saving my Typhoon so that I can escape every Necrotic that I need to. If you're looking for group composition advice to help you deal with Necrotic though, whether maybe you're pugging hierarchy so there's some more coordination, or you are in voice comms, whatever it is, there are some really nice tools certain DPS or healer specs have. Again, talking about this week in particular, in Season 2, Sanguine Necrotic combo, knockbacks have double value because they can be used to handle both affixes, where something like Heavy Slows, while good against Necrotic, can actually sometimes troll you a little bit when it comes to Sanguine. Classes like Monks have access to Ring of Peace, Druids have Balance Affinity, and that gives them Typhoon, so you can't really go wrong with either. Certain specs also have unique knockbacks, such as Elemental Shamans with Thunderstorm, Healing Priests who have Shining Force, and Marksmanship Hunters who have Bursting Shot. Outside of these knockbacks, plenty of other classes and specs have other utilities to help deal with Necrotic. For slows, you've got Frost Mage's pretty much entire kit, as well as Grip of the Dead, I mentioned for Blood DKs, which is actually available to all DK specs. In a similar vein, DPS warriors are often Kyrian or Night Fae as well, with both abilities giving you some space to get away on a fairly short cooldown. AoE stuns can also be nice with things like Leg Sweep, Cap Totem, Shadow Fury, Chaos Nova. I'm sure I missed some, but there's many different classes to choose from in that regard. Binding Shot, another great one I haven't mentioned. It's not a hard CC, but it does stop mobs in their tracks for 8 seconds after triggering it, which is extremely helpful. Anything that removes aggro from you taking some hits is also great, so Trents from Boomkins, Earth Elemental from Shamans are great. I'm sure, again, things I've missed here, so if you have any suggestions of abilities people can use to help deal with Necrotic, please do leave a comment down below. In the end, dealing with Necrotic is fairly straightforward, but hopefully this video helps you understand what things you need to consider when deciding when exactly to begin your kite, as well as what tools not only you as the tank have, but also what your other party members have at their disposal. If you did learn something, please do press that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like it. You can also check me out over on Twitch at Tactics, where I stream high Mythic Plus keys as a Guardian Druid, as well as Mythic raiding. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.